my inspirations. My name is Asper, and in this video, I wanted to walk you through the basics of the ROLI Seaboard Block Studio Edition MIDI controller. A dynamic and, frankly, very unique MIDI controller that allows you to change the sound as you play. Now, the ROLI Seaboard Block controller has been on the market for a while, but the Studio Edition, this box, will grant you access to a bunch of software that's super useful and specifically tailored for this MIDI controller, although can be used with others. Now, full disclosure, the nice people over at ROLI were kind enough to send me this controller for free, but honestly, I would recommend it to anyone. So what sets this controller apart from other keyboards on the market? The answer is ROLI's dynamic 5D sound. This allows you to dynamically change the sound of what you're playing. The 5 ways you can change your sound are by striking, pressing, gliding, sliding, and by lifting. Now, the ROLI Seaboard Block controller can be plugged into any MIDI-capable device, such as a computer, using a USB-C cable, or you can connect to any device using Bluetooth. You can see your notes are arranged here. They're raised up from the controller. The sections at the bottom and top of the controller are flat, but they can still be used to play notes. These are just here so you can more easily glide. You can use the arrows in the top right and top left corners of the controller to change what octave you're playing in. Now, the feeling of this controller is a little bit different than most. It's actually a little bit squishy. It takes a little bit to get used to, but it feels nice. Now, this keyboard is cool to look at and touch, but it can't really do much without the right software. Luckily for you, what comes in the Studio Edition box is the following software. You can use ROLI Dashboard to change the macro parameters of your controller. For example, you can set the semitone range that you can glide, or you can adjust the sensitivities of the different 5D touches. In this box, you'll also receive ROLI Studio Drums and ROLI Studio Player. These are independent software that you can use to play this controller, either as a drum pad or as a keyboard, respectively. ROLI Studio Drums, for example, looks like this. Now, I won't cover this software too much because we're using a keyboard. However, you can actually use the Seaboard Block keyboard as a drum pad. If you were to pick up the ROLI Beatmaker kit, for example, that might be hardware that's more suitable for this software, intended to be used as a drum pad. And actually, one thing that's really cool about the ROLI blocks is you can actually connect them using the ports on the top or left and right sides of this controller. Now, using the Seaboard Block as a drum pad, you might have to move around to be in the proper octave, but once the software's booted up, if you press on your notes, you should be able to start playing this drum pad. Now, this box also comes with ROLI Studio Player. This is an independent software that you can use to play this keyboard as a keyboard. If you'd like, you can double-click to open up ROLI Studio Player, and you can start playing your keyboard. However, one thing I'd like to suggest, if I may, is in this box, you'll also receive a license to Ableton Live Lite. This is a digital audio workstation, or DAW, a software that you can use to arrange and even produce your own music. The thing that's cool about this is you can open Ableton Live, you can hit the tab key to switch over to the arrangement view, navigate over to plugins in Ableton's library on the left, find ROLI Studio Drums or ROLI Studio Player, and simply drag them onto a MIDI track in Ableton. Now, you can use this software within Ableton. This gives you the advantage of being able to record your sounds that come from your keyboard. Then you can add layers on top of that and even export your final track. Lastly, I'd like to also point out you gain access to Strobe 2. This is a virtual synth, a much more powerful instrumental software that you can use to control your keyboard. If you're into tweaking your sounds and tinkering with the fine-tuned engineering side of music production, then I might recommend this to you. Finally, you'll also gain access to Max 8, a sort of jack-of-all-trades software that you can use within Ableton Live if you'd like. So now, I'd like to take the rest of this video and focus on the ROLI Studio Player, since I feel like that's the software that's most specifically tailored to the Seaboard Block controller. So if we drag ROLI Studio Player onto a MIDI track in Ableton Live, we should see a window open up that looks like this. On the left, we can explore different sounds, preset instruments that were made for this controller. We can search by different categories, by sound packs, or even by looking up a specific term. You can filter by standard sounds, instruments that will work for any MIDI controller that you plug in, or MPE sounds, instruments that support the dynamic 5D touches such as this controller. If you're feeling spicy, you can click this button right here to select a random preset from this list. Now, each of these instrument presets will have their own macro parameters. These are different settings you can tweak to slightly alter the sound of your instrument. Similarly, there's also an extra set of parameters you can adjust using this XY grid here at the bottom. Now, I believe you can use other ROLI Block controllers, plug them into your Seaboard Block controller, and use those to dynamically change this XY grid on the spot, just giving you a little bit of additional tools to play around with. Whenever you find a sound that you like, you can click the heart icon to the right of its name, and you can navigate back to your favorites by clicking the heart right here. And you can click the play button to get back to this view where we can tack on a few adjustments to our sound. Now, if you're familiar with the term, these are essentially MIDI effects. We can throw on some smart chords to automatically generate chords just by pressing a single note. You can change what key you're in up here. Let's pretend I want to be in G major. And I can use these vertical bars to determine what chord is generated at the touch of which note. Say, for example, whenever I want to play a B, I want to generate a 7th chord. Or if I press G, maybe I want to generate a suspended 4th. You can use this toggle to generate a bass note onto your chord. This will just tack on your root note 1 octave below. And you can use the auto invert toggle to invert your chords, effectively keeping all your notes within a more natural voice, generally within 1 octave. And you can adjust this strum percent to determine how fast your chord will play. You can toggle on the multi-layer arpeggiator to throw on multiple arpeggiators, a way to pulse through your notes. If I were to turn off my smart chords and turn the multi-layer arpeggiator on, it'll begin to pulse at whatever note I then press. This will determine the number of hits, and this determines the rate at which the arpeggiator should play, which is entirely dependent on our BPM, which you can adjust right above where it says BPM. And you can see here visually, this is where our notes will be hitting. I can use the offset to offset the cycle, and I can use this to determine how many octaves this spans. I can adjust other settings too, such as the mode of this arpeggiator, or the swing, maybe to get a little bit of variety. Now, on top of that, you can then add in multiple arpeggiators. Now, the really cool thing about these two MIDI effects is you can actually stack smart chords and the multi-layer arpeggiator on top of each other. If I were to turn my smart chords on and my arpeggiator, whatever note I press will first generate a chord like we saw earlier, then it'll cycle through the notes that are generated in that chord at the rate of my arpeggiator. So as a refresher, if I were to press just this note only with my smart chords on, and then now, if I throw my arpeggiator in the mix, I start to get something a little more exciting. Now, one last piece I'd like to mention is you can also throw audio effects on top of your sound. You can use up to 4 audio effects. You can view them either one by one in this single mode, or you can use multi-view to see all 4 audio effects at once, laid out in these XY grids that we saw before. You can change what audio effect is being used by clicking its drop-down. Say, for example, we wanted to add in a little bit of reverb onto this sound. I can then adjust this XY grid to change this audio effect to my liking. Now, as a note, you'll only hear your audio effect as you're adjusting the parameters, until you decide you want to keep that audio effect, in which case you can press the hold button to permanently keep your audio effect on. And there you have it. That's the basics of how you can use the ROLI Seaboard Block Studio Edition to generate some really cool and unique sounds. Honestly, I am thoroughly impressed at how this little box can create something so beautiful with not that much knowledge out of the gate. There wasn't any crazy technical engineering aspect to make the sounds I made in this video. However, if that's your cup of tea, you can use Strobe 2, the VST I mentioned earlier. And this is where you can create more in-depth, fine-tuned sounds, if sound design is your thing. anything. Otherwise, that'll do it for this video teaching you how to use the ROLI Seaboard Block Studio Edition kit. Thank you so much, ROLI. I really appreciate it. If you guys want to check this out for yourself, you can click the link in the description below. It'll take you right there, and you can use the knowledge learned in this video to start making your own beautiful sounds. But that's all I got today, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I will see you in the next one. Bye.